The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest room Ambassador Doan had ever seen. Giant pillars made of crystal stretched up toward a ceiling so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath it. Floating screens showed maps of 1,000 star systems. Lights of every color danced in the air, and the seats of 12 alien species curved around the central speaking platform like a giant bowl. Doan remembered the first time he stood here, 5 years ago. He had felt so small, so honored. Earth had finally joined the galactic community after centuries of dreaming about the stars. Humanity had arrived. Now, standing on that same platform, Doan felt nothing but cold disappointment. Beside him stood Lieutenant Hannah, his aide and translator. She was young, barely 30, but her eyes carried a weight that made her seem older. She had seen the reports. She knew why they were here. High Counselor Venna spoke first. She was Turali, a species with silver scales that covered their entire body. When she was pleased, the scales would shimmer like moonlight on water. Today, they were dull and gray. The human delegation has requested emergency military support for their border colonies. Venna announced to the assembly. Her voice echoed through the hall. This is the 4th such request in 2 years. Doan stepped forward. High Counselor, the situation has become desperate. The Hollow Swarm has attacked 6 of our colony worlds. 400,000 of our people have died. We have evacuated who we can, but our ships are not fast enough. Our weapons are not strong enough. We need help. A murmur passed through the alien delegates. Some looked curious. Others looked bored. Most looked indifferent. Counselor Bram of the Keshi Collective raised one of his many tentacles. The Keshi were soft-bodied creatures who floated in special tanks of liquid during council meetings. Their voices came through speakers mounted on their containers. Ambassador Doan, Bram said, "We understand your concern. Truly we do. But the Council has rules. A species must be a member for at least 300 cycles before requesting military assistance. Earth has been a member for only 40 cycles. Surely you understand." "People are dying," Doan said simply. "Children are dying," Bram replied. "This is unfortunate, but rules exist for good reasons. Your species is young. You are impulsive. You do not yet understand the careful balance of galactic politics. If we help you today, what do we tell the next young species that asks for help tomorrow?" Doan looked around the chamber. The Numari delegation, tall beings made of living stone, sat motionless. The Olan hierarchy, insect-like creatures with compound eyes, watched without expression. The other species whispered among themselves, clearly uninterested in the problems of one small planet. "We joined this council because we believed in cooperation," Doan said. "We believed that advanced civilizations would help each other. We believed that together we would be stronger than alone." High Counselor Venna made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You believed what young species always believe. Idealism, romance, dreams." She shook her head slowly. "The galaxy does not work on dreams, Ambassador. It works on patience, on time, on earning your place. Humanity has existed for a mere handful of millennia. The Turali have existed for 2 million years. The Keshi for 3 million. You must learn to wait." And his hands tightened into fists at her sides. Doan felt the anger radiating from her, but she stayed silent, professional to the end. "And while we wait," Doan asked quietly, "how many more will die?" "That," Venna said, "is not our concern. It is yours." The words hung in the air like poison. Doan had heard such words before, in different forms. He had heard them when Earth first applied for council membership, and was told to wait 50 years. He had heard them when humans asked for access to medical technology, and were told to develop their own. He had heard them when human ships were attacked by pirates, and the council said it was an internal matter, always waiting. Always patience. Always being told that humanity was too young, too small, too unimportant. Doan took a deep breath. He had prepared for this moment. He had hoped it would not come, but he had prepared. "Very well," he said. His voice was calm, steady, almost gentle. "If that is the Council's final decision, then Earth has a decision of its own to announce." Venna tilted her head. curious despite herself. "And what decision is that?" Doan smiled. It was a strange smile, Hannah thought. Not angry. Not bitter. Almost peaceful. "Effective immediately," Doan announced. "Earth formally withdraws its membership from the Galactic Council. We withdraw our ambassadors, our trade agreements, our scientific exchanges, and our territorial claims within Council space. As of this moment, humanity is no longer part of your organization." The chamber exploded into chaos. Delegates shouted. Screens flickered with urgent messages. Counselor Bram's tank bubbled violently as his tentacles waved in confusion. Even the stone-faced Numari shifted in their seats. "You cannot simply leave." Vanna called out, her scales now flashing with alarm. "There are procedures, protocols, exit negotiations that take decades." "We are young," Doan replied, still smiling. "We are impulsive. We do not understand your careful balance." He bowed slightly. "Forgive us. We will learn patience somewhere else." He turned and walked toward the exit. Hannah followed, matching his stride perfectly. Behind them, the chaos continued. Voices demanded explanations. Warnings were shouted. Threats were made, but Doan did not look back. Not once, as they reached the great doors of the chamber, Hannah leaned close. "Do you think they will realize their mistake?" "Eventually," Doan said. "They are old. They are wise. They have seen much." He stepped through the door into the corridor beyond. But wisdom means nothing if it comes too late. The doors closed behind them, cutting off the noise of the council. In the silence that followed, Hannah asked, "What happens now?" Doan looked toward the window at the end of the corridor. Through it, he could see the stars. Billions of them. An endless sea of light and possibility. "Now," he said quietly, "we go home, and we become something they cannot ignore." They walked together into the unknown future, leaving the Galactic Council to wonder what they had done. 3 years passed like water through open fingers. Captain Taiwu stood on the bridge of his ship, the Persistence, and watched a new world fill the viewing screen. It was beautiful. Blue oceans covered most of the surface, with green and brown countenance rising from the water like sleeping giants. White clouds drifted across the atmosphere in lazy spirals. "Atmosphere is breathable," reported Navigator Somi from her station. She was a small woman with quick eyes and quicker fingers. Oxygen, nitrogen, trace elements, almost identical to Earth. Liquid water confirmed. "No signs of intelligent life?" Taiwu nodded slowly. "That makes 17. 17 worlds. 17 new homes waiting for humanity. All of them ignored by the Galactic Council for thousands of years, because they existed in regions of space the Council considered worthless. It's too far from major trade routes. Too distant from established civilizations. Too much trouble to explore, but humanity had no trade routes to protect. No ancient territories to defend. They had nothing but time, determination, a universe full of empty worlds. The Persistence was one of 50 exploration vessels that had launched from Earth since the withdrawal from the Council. Each ship carried scientists, engineers, doctors, and dreamers. They mapped new systems. They analyzed new planets. They planted flags on worlds that had never known the touch of intelligent life, and they did it all in complete silence. Back on Earth, the changes were even more remarkable. Dr. Yuna worked in a laboratory that had once been a storage building. 3 years ago, it held old equipment and forgotten projects. Now it held the most advanced research facility in human history. She stared at the device on her workbench. It was small, barely the size of her palm. But inside, it was a revolution. "It works," she whispered. Engineer Giwan looked up from his own station. He was a large man with gentle hands, perfect for delicate work. "You confirmed it?" "I sent a message to the Persistence. They received it instantly. Not in hours. Not in minutes. Instantly." Yuna's hands were shaking. "Faster than light communication. Real-time contact across any distance." The Council said it was impossible. Guan walked over to look at the device. They said a lot of things were impossible. It was true. The Council had declared many human ideas to be fantasies. artificial intelligence that could think creatively, medical technology that could repair cells at the molecular level, energy systems that drew power from the vacuum of space itself. The great alien civilizations had examined these concepts millennia ago and concluded they could not work. Humanity had not listened. Without council restrictions, human scientists had been free to pursue every wild theory, every strange idea, every impossible dream. Some failed. Many failed. But some succeeded beyond anyone's imagination in soul. A team led by Dr. Minji developed a construction system that could turn a barren rock into a living world within a single year. The Council's terraforming technology took centuries. Humanity had reduced it to months. In Mumbai, a medical researcher named Arjun created nanomachines that could repair any injury, cure any disease, extend human life far beyond its natural limits. The Council's medicine could only treat symptoms. Humanity had learned to fix causes. In Snow Paulo, an engineer named Clara built a new kind of engine. It did not bend space like the Council's drives. It stepped through space, moving from one point to another without crossing the distance between. The Council had never imagined such a thing was possible, and through it all, humanity said nothing. No announcements were made to the wider galaxy. No demonstrations were offered to the watching alien civilizations. Human ships passed through Council space sometimes, trading for basic goods, exchanging polite greetings with curious observers, but they never spoke of what they were building. They never revealed what they had learned. "Should we share this?" Giwan asked, holding Yuna's communication device. The Keshi might pay a fortune for this technology. The Turali would trade whole star systems. Yuna shook her head. "They called us children. They said we were too young to help." She took the device back gently. "Let the children play with their toys in peace. The adults are busy being wise." There was no bitterness in her voice, only quiet determination. On the frontier, Captain Taiwu landed on the 17th world and took his first breath of alien air. It smelled like rain and growing things, like home but different, like possibility. Somi stood beside him, scanning the landscape with her instruments. Perfect soil for farming, rich mineral deposits in the mountains, freshwater rivers feeding into the oceans. People could be happy here. They will be, Taiwu said. Soon, already, signals were traveling back to Earth at impossible speed, thanks to Yuna's devices. Colony ships would launch within weeks. Families would arrive within months. Within a year, children would be playing in fields that had never known laughter before, and the Council would know nothing about it. Sometimes, Taiwu wondered if humanity was being petty. Silent treatment, like angry children refusing to speak to parents who had hurt them. But then he remembered the 400,000 dead. He remembered the colonies that burned while the Council debated protocols. He remembered Doan's calm smile as he walked out of that great chamber. This was not pettiness. This was focus. Humanity had wasted too many years trying to impress civilizations that would never respect them. They had begged for scraps from tables that were never meant to seat them. They had played by rules designed to keep them weak and grateful. No more now. Humanity built for itself, grew for itself, dreamed for itself. The galaxy was vast beyond imagining, and there was room enough for everyone. If the Council wanted nothing to do with the young and impulsive humans, then the young and impulsive humans would go somewhere else, somewhere better. Taiwu picked up a handful of alien soil and let it run through his fingers. "We're going to fill this galaxy with our children," he said quietly. "And when the Council finally notices, they're going to wonder how they missed it." Somi laughed softly. "They'll probably say it's impossible." "They'll always do," Taiwu agreed. "And we always prove them wrong." They stood together on that empty world, watching the sun set over an ocean no human had ever sailed, and they said nothing to anyone but themselves. 7 years after humanity walked away, High Counselor Vena could not sleep. She stood in her private office, high above the council chambers, staring at reports that made no sense. The screens around her glowed with data that should have been impossible. Human vessels had been spotted in 17 new star systems. That was the first report 3 years ago. She had dismissed it as a mistake. Humans did not have the technology to reach those regions. They were too far, too empty, too worthless. Then the reports changed. 30 systems, 50, 70, 112. Human ships were everywhere. They moved faster than any known drive could allow. They appeared in distant regions without passing through the space between. They built colonies on barren worlds that bloomed into gardens within months. Venice scales had turned a permanent shade of gray. She had not shimmered in years. How is this happening? She demanded of her advisors. They had nothing when they left. Basic engines. Simple medicine. They were barely more advanced than animals. Counselor Bram floated in his tank nearby, his tentacles moving slowly through the liquid. We underestimated them, he admitted. Perhaps they had hidden technology we did not detect. Or perhaps, said Ambassador Wren of the Olan hierarchy, they simply worked harder than we expected. Wren was different from the other council members. He had remained silent during humanity's departure 7 years ago. He had not mocked them. He had not dismissed them. He had simply watched with his compound eyes, seeing something the others had missed. We gave them motivation, Wren continued. We told them they were too young, too small, too unimportant to help. So they decided to become important without us. Fenna hissed in frustration. Send diplomatic envoys. Reconnect with them. Find out what they know and how they learned it. The first envoy departed within days. A Terali ambassador named Shella traveled to the nearest human colony world, expecting to find struggling settlers in temporary shelters. Instead, she found a city. Tall buildings rose toward the sky, made of materials Sella did not recognize. Parks and gardens filled the spaces between structures, green and alive and beautiful. People walked the streets in clean clothes, talking and laughing. Children played in open squares, while their parents watched from nearby benches. The humans welcomed Sella politely. They offered her food and comfortable quarters. They answered her questions with simple, friendly words. Yes, they were doing well. Yes, they were happy. No, they did not need anything from the council. When she asked about their technology, they smiled and changed the subject. When she asked about their expansion, they offered her more food. When she asked about returning to the council, they thanked her for visiting and escorted her back to her ship. Sella returned to council space confused and disturbed. They were kind, she reported. Generous. But they have no interest in us. None at all. We simply do not matter to them. The second envoy had an even stranger experience. Ambassador Brell of the Keshi Collective visited a human educational center, expecting to see children learning basic mathematics. Instead, he watched students who could not be older than 12 years discussing concepts that Keshi scholars studied for decades. He saw medical facilities that cured diseases that Keshi had accepted as permanent. He witnessed engineers building machines that seemed to violate the laws of physics. They have surpassed us, Brell reported, his tentacles shaking. In 7 years, they have jumped ahead by centuries, perhaps millennia. I do not understand how this is possible. The third envoy took longest to return. Ambassador Vorn of the Numari, beings of living stone who measured time in geological ages, spent 3 months traveling through human space. He visited 12 colonies. He observed 14 space stations. He watched 17 different research facilities when he returned. His report was the simplest and most frightening of all. They do not need us, Vorn said, in his slow, grinding voice. They do not want us, and they no longer fear us. We are nothing to them now. Less than nothing. We are a memory they have chosen to forget. Venna read these reports again and again, searching for some weakness, some opportunity, some way to bring humanity back into the Council's influence. She found nothing. The humans had built their own trade networks, connecting colonies that stretched across unexplored space. They had created their own alliance of worlds, governed by rules that made sense to them. They had developed their own culture, their own art, their own dreams, and they had done it all without asking permission. In the council chambers, the whispers grew louder. Other species began to question the old ways. If humanity could achieve so much in just 7 years, what else had the Council gotten wrong? What other young species had been dismissed too quickly? What other opportunities had been lost to pride and protocol? Venna had no answers. She stood at her window watching ships come and go from the Council station. Tarali ships, Keshi ships, Numari ships. All the ancient and wise civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years. And somewhere out there, beyond the borders of Council space, humanity was building something new, something better, something that did not need the permission of old and tired empires. We made a mistake, Venna admitted to the empty room. We pushed them away, and they became stronger for it. She turned back to her reports, searching for words that might repair the damage. But deep in her heart, she knew the truth. Some mistakes cannot be fixed with words. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. And some children, once ignored, grow up to surpass their parents. The silence from human space continued. No messages, no demands, no anger. Just the quiet sound of a species that had learned to live without the galaxy's approval. That silence, Venna realized, was louder than any words could ever be. The hollow swarm had existed for 10,000 years. No one knew where it came from. No one knew what it truly wanted. It was simply a force of nature, like a hurricane or an earthquake, except this hurricane was made of billions of living creatures that consumed everything in their path. The creatures were horrible to look at. Each one was the size of a small ship, with dozens of legs and mouths that never stopped eating. They fed on anything organic, plants, animals, people. Entire worlds were stripped bare when the swarm passed through. Leaving nothing but empty rock and silence, the Galactic Council had survived the swarm for millennia. Through a simple strategy, sacrifice. When the swarm approached, the Council would identify acceptable losses. Frontier colonies, minor species, populations that would not be missed. These were offered to the swarm like food to a hungry beast, and the swarm would eat its fill and move on. It was cruel. It was cowardly. But it had worked for 10,000 years. Now, for the first time, the swarm turned toward a target that could not be sacrificed. The Tarali. Homeworld High Counselor Venna received the news in the middle of the night. She rushed to the command center, her scales flashing with panic. The screen showed the swarm approaching, a dark cloud of creatures so vast it blocked out the stars. How long? She demanded. 43 days, her military commander reported. Perhaps less if they increased speed. 43 days until the swarm reached the Tarali homeworld. 43 days until 8 billion. Tarella citizens faced the same fate as those acceptable losses. The Council had sacrificed for millennia. Venna sent messages to every Council species. Emergency requests for military support. Desperate pleas for assistance. The responses came quickly. The Keshi offered 200 ships. Not enough. The Numori offered their stone warriors. Not enough. The Olan offered their swarm fighters. Not enough altogether. The combined military power of the Galactic Council might slow the hollow swarm. It might kill 1 million of the creatures, perhaps 10 million. But the swarm contained billions. For every creature destroyed, 100 more would take its place. The mathematics were simple and terrible. The Tarali homeworld would fall. Venna prepared evacuation orders. Perhaps some of her people could escape. Perhaps some colonies would survive. Perhaps the Tarali civilization would continue in some reduced form. Then the swarm stopped. At the edge of Tarali space, the dark tide of creatures encountered something unexpected. A wall of human ships stretched across the void, blocking the swarm's path. They were not Council vessels. They bore no alliance markings. They simply appeared as if stepping out of nowhere. Commander Minho stood on the bridge of his battleship, the Remembrance. It was a new ship, built in the quiet years after humanity left the Council. Its weapons were technologies the Council had never imagined. Its shields were materials the Council had declared impossible. Beside him, Lieutenant Bora monitored the communication channels. The Tarali are asking what we're doing here, she reported. Tell them we're handling a pest problem, Minho said calmly. The swarm tested the human defenses. Millions of creatures rushed forward, mouths open, legs reaching. They expected to tear through these strange new ships, the way they had torn through everything else for 10,000 years. They were wrong. Human weapons fired. Not the slow, clumsy beams the Council used. These were precise strikes of energy that cut through swarm creatures like light through darkness. Thousands died in the first second. Tens of thousands in the first minute. The swarm pressed harder. More creatures joined the attack. The dark cloud grew thicker, blocking all light from the stars. Human shields held. The strange energy barriers that the Council had mocked as fantasy absorbed every impact. Every acid spray, every desperate assault. The creatures threw themselves against the human fleet again and again and again and again. They died. For 3 days the battle continued. Human ships moved with impossible speed, dodging attacks that should have been unavoidable. Human weapons fired with impossible accuracy, hitting targets that should have been untouchable. Human crews worked without rest, rotating through shifts with quiet efficiency. On the 4th day, the swarm retreated. Mina watched the dark cloud pull back, shrinking into the distance. For the first time in 10,000 years, the hollow swarm had been defeated. Not slowed, not redirected, defeated. Bora looked up from her console, her eyes wide. They're leaving. They're actually leaving. They'll find easier prey somewhere else, Minho said. Somewhere far from here. The communication channels exploded with messages. Turali voices crying with relief. Keshi signals expressing amazement. Numari transmissions grinding out what might have been gratitude. And one message from High Counselor Vena herself.
Human Commander?
Vena's voice crackled through the speakers. I do not understand. We refused to help you. We ignored your suffering. We called you children and sent you away. Why would you save us? Minho considered the question for a long moment. Around him, his crew waited in silence. They all remembered the stories. The 400,000 dead. The colonies that burned. The council chamber where Ambassador Doan smiled and walked away. Tell her this, Minho finally said to Bora. Tell her we remember what it feels like to ask for help and be refused. Tell her we remember the loneliness of facing death alone. He paused. And tell her we chose to be better than those who refused us.
Ow, Bora.
Transmitted the message. There was no response from Vena. Perhaps she was crying. Perhaps she was ashamed. Perhaps she simply had no words left. Minho turned to his crew. Set course for home. Our work here is finished. It's her, Bora said carefully. The Turali are asking if we want to negotiate a new alliance. They're offering technology exchanges, trade agreements, council membership with full privileges. Minho shook his head. We didn't come here for rewards. We came here because it was right. He looked out at the stars, at the empty space where the swarm had been. Let them keep their council. Let them keep their protocols. We have our own path now. The human fleet turned and disappeared into the void. Leaving behind a saved world and a humbled civilization, they had made their point. They had no interest in gratitude. 12 years after Ambassador Doan walked out of the council chambers, the Great Hall felt like a tomb. The crystal pillars still stretched toward the high ceiling. The floating screens still showed maps of 1,000 star systems. The seats of the 12 alien species still curved around the central platform. But something had changed. Something had died. High Counselor Vena stood where she had stood so many times before. Her scales, once bright silver, had faded to a dull gray that never changed anymore. Her movements were slow and careful. Like an old woman carrying a heavy weight, the chamber was full. Every species had sent representatives. Every delegate sat in silence, waiting for words that everyone knew were coming. I have called this assembly, Vena began, to make a formal declaration on behalf of the Galactic Council. She paused. Gathering strength. 12 years ago, a young species came to us asking for help. Their people were dying. Their colonies were burning. They faced an enemy they could not defeat alone. Vena's voice trembled slightly. And we told them to wait. We told them to be patient. We told them they were too young, too small, too unimportant to deserve our assistance. The delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Many of them had been present that day. Many of them remembered, called them children, Venna continued. We said they did not understand the careful balance of galactic politics. We believed they would fail on their own, or come crawling back to beg for membership. She shook her head slowly. We were wrong. About everything. The words hung in the air like a confession. In 12 years, humanity has accomplished more than we achieved in 12 million. They have colonized over 200 worlds. They have developed technologies we declared impossible. They have built a civilization that needs nothing from us. Venna's scales flickered with something that might have been shame. And when we faced destruction, when the hollow swarm came for our homeworld, they saved us. They asked for nothing in return. They simply saved us and left. Counselor Bram's tentacles moved nervously in his tank. Perhaps this demonstrates their willingness to rebuild relations. Perhaps we can negotiate. They do not want negotiations, Venna interrupted. They do not want our technology, our trade, our approval. They have built their own path, and they walk it without looking back. Ambassador Wren of the Olan hierarchy nodded slowly. They do not need our acknowledgement of this mistake, no, Venna agreed. But they deserve it anyway. She straightened her spine, standing as tall as she could manage. This council formally acknowledges its error. We dismissed humanity when we should have welcomed them. We ignored their suffering when we should have helped them. We pushed them away when we should have held them close. Her voice grew stronger. Let this admission be recorded in our histories. Let future generations know what we did and what it cost us. Let no species ever be treated this way again. The chamber was silent. No one argued. No one protested. There was nothing left to say. Far from the council chambers, on a world that had been lifeless rock a decade ago, Admiral Doan sat in a garden. He was an old man now. His hair had turned white, and his movements were slower than they used to be. But his eyes were still sharp. Still bright with the same calm determination that had carried him through that final council session so many years ago. The garden surrounded a small house on a hill overlooking the ocean. Flowers of every color bloomed in neat rows. Trees provided shade from the warm sun. Birds sang in the branches. Species that had been brought from Earth and adapted to this new world. Doan had helped design this colony. He had watched the first settlers arrive, watched the first buildings rise, watched the first children born on alien soil. Now grandchildren played in streets that had once been empty plains. One of those grandchildren sat beside him now. Her name was Isio, and she was 7 years old. Grandfather, she said, watching a butterfly land on a nearby flower. My teacher told us about the Galactic Council today. She said they made a big mistake a long time ago. Dohan smiled. Did she? She said they were mean to humans. They said we were too young and too small. Isiel's face scrunched up with confusion. But that doesn't make sense. How can someone be too young to help? That's a very good question, Doan said. The council believed that being old made them wise. They thought that because they had existed for millions of years, they knew everything important. They forgot that young species can sometimes see things that old species have stopped looking for. Like what? Doan considered this. Like hope. Like determination. Like the belief that anything is possible if you work hard enough. He picked up a fallen leaf and turned it over in his hands. The council had become comfortable. They had rules for everything, and they believed those rules were more important than people. They forgot that rules exist to serve life, not the other way around. Isiel nodded slowly, as if she understood. Perhaps she did. Children often understood more than adults expected. Grandfather, she asked, did you ever think we would fail? When you left the council, did you ever worry that they were right about us? Doan laughed softly. Every day. Every single day. But I also believed in something stronger than fear. What? He looked out at the ocean, at the sunset, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. In the distance, he could see the lights of the city beginning to flicker on. Families gathering for dinner. Children finishing their play. A world alive and growing and dreaming. I believed in us, he said. In humanity. In our ability to fall down and get back up. In our refusal to accept that anything is truly impossible. He pulled Iciel close. The council thought we were too young. They thought we needed their permission to succeed. But they forgot the most important thing about humans. What's that? Doan smiled, the same calm smile he had worn 12 years ago when he walked out of the council chambers. We don't need permission to prove them wrong. Iciel laughed and hugged her grandfather tight. The sun continued to set. The stars began to appear, millions of lights scattered across the infinite dark. And somewhere out there, in the great hall of the Galactic Council, the ancient species were finally learning what humanity had always known. Youth is not a weakness, silence is not surrender, and the greatest strength is not measured in years. But in the courage to keep moving forward, when everyone expects you to fall, the story of humanity was just beginning.